Anubis scared pretty much everyone who saw him, and honestly, it made sense. He wasn't a normal dog, and the vet noticed right away. The moment Jason walked in with Anubis, the vet took one look at them and quietly called the police. Jason had no clue. He was just sitting in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine, completely unaware that his world was about to turn upside down. But the cops were already on their way, and things were about to get bad. Really bad. Jason's first instinct was to grab Anubis and bolt. He didn't understand why the vet would call the police, but he wasn't going to risk losing his dog, not after everything. But it was already too late. Just as he stood up to leave, the doors opened and the police walked in. There was nowhere to go. Jason didn't want to give up Anubis, not without understanding what was going on. But then the officers started talking, and as they explained, something in Jason's face shifted. Suddenly, it all clicked. Anubis wasn't just any old dog. How had he missed it for this long? Still, the question burned in his mind. Why did the vet call the cops? What was so wrong with Anubis? And could Jason really let him go? The strange thing was, Jason hadn't even planned to get a dog that day. He had just been walking through the farmer's market when he saw him. Their eyes met, just for a second. But Jason felt something. The dog's yellowish eyes and sharply pointed ears gave him a strange, watchful look. Then Anubis turned away, staring blankly at the wall of the pen. Jason felt himself inching closer, even though part of him was nervous. The dog gave off an unsettling energy, but still, there was something there. He already knew he wasn't leaving without him. For one, he had already mentally named the big black dog Anubis. And second, the man selling the dogs in the corner didn't seem to care much for them. The dog Jason was drawn to had just arrived the day before. The seller barely looked up when Jason asked about him. "Too mean-looking," the guy muttered. "Nobody wants him. He'll probably end up with animal control tomorrow if no one takes him." That was all Jason needed to hear. He worried the man might ask for more money than he could afford. But instead, the seller seemed eager to get rid of the dog. It didn't feel right, but Jason couldn't walk away. He knew deep down he should have talked to his wife, Monica, first, especially with how fierce the dog looked, and considering they had 4-year-old twins at home. Who knew how a strange dog like this would behave around kids? But time was running out. The seller was starting to pack up. Jason couldn't let the dog be sent away and possibly put down. He thought about Monica. He knew what she would say. Absolutely not. But something in his gut told him this dog couldn't be left behind. So Jason handed over the cash, clipped on the leash, and led the quiet, oddly well-behaved Anubis to his truck. The strange dog stayed completely calm the whole drive home, just quietly staring out the window like he was deep in thought. When they pulled into the driveway, Jason realized something odd. He hadn't heard a single sound from Anubis the entire time. Not a bark, not even a whine. Jason had never seen a dog act like this before. Maybe Anubis had been trained in the past, possibly a police or military dog that hadn't made the cut. That kind of stillness couldn't be normal, could it? As Jason stepped out and headed toward the porch with Anubis at his side, he could practically feel Monica's glare through the front window. But before she could get to the door, their twin boys, Melvin and Marty, had already flung it open, rushing out to see what their dad had brought home. Jason held his breath, gripping the leash tightly. What if Anubis suddenly turned aggressive? Monica came running up behind the boys, panic clearly written across her face. But Anubis, despite how intimidating he looked, stayed completely composed, just standing there quietly as the twins bounced with excitement. "He's so cool," Melvin shouted. "We have the coolest dog ever," Marty chimed in. Anubis didn't flinch. He just stood there, calmly watching everything unfold. With the boys so thrilled and Anubis so calm, Monica didn't say anything right away, but Jason could tell she was furious. And she was. Once the boys had gone back inside, Monica turned to him, arms crossed, voice sharp. How could he make such a huge decision without talking to her first? What was he thinking bringing home a dog like that out of nowhere, especially with their kids in the house? And why, of all places, would he buy a dog from some random guy at a farmer's market? Jason listened without interrupting. Once Monica had said her piece, he apologized for not discussing it with her. Then he explained everything, the condition the dog had been in, the seller's warning that Anubis might be sent to a shelter and put down. As Monica listened, her anger started to soften. She admitted that, even though Anubis had frightened her at first, there was something about him she liked. Still, she was scared. What if he didn't do well around the twins, who could be loud and unpredictable? Jason agreed right away. They would always keep an eye on the boys when they were around Anubis. Better safe than sorry. But Anubis, it turned out, was more than just safe. He ended up scaring off way more than just burglars. Much to their surprise and relief, Anubis quickly showed he was perfectly suited to family life. Nothing rattled him. He never barked, never growled, and didn't seem bothered by anything. And as a bonus, his serious look made him a natural guard dog. Strangers gave him a wide berth, which Jason and Monica found a little awkward, but it didn't seem to affect Anubis one bit. Whether it was Monica or Jason walking him through the park, people, joggers, dog owners, anyone nearby, would cross the path or steer clear entirely. His presence alone was enough to keep others at a distance. Anubis had now been part of the family for almost a month, and in all that time, his quiet, watchful personality hadn't changed at all. It started to get to Jason, how a dog could be so still, so unshakable. He never got excited, never seemed down either. It was like living with a statue. Jason decided it was time to get some answers. He booked a vet appointment for 3 days later to get Anubis thoroughly checked out. But what was supposed to be a basic checkup was about to turn into something Jason never could have seen coming. Jason still wasn't even sure what kind of breed Anubis was, let alone what might be wrong with him. He had a few guesses, but none of them quite fit. In the end, only a vet would really be able to tell him the truth about Anubis. After spending several hours reading online and getting nowhere, Jason was ready for answers. The twins were excited and begged to come along to the vet. They thought maybe they could help keep Anubis calm, but Jason decided to leave them at home. If there really was something unusual about the dog, he didn't want to risk them getting scared. Not that Anubis needed calming. Jason was pretty sure that not even a cold, sterile vet's office could rattle this dog. But what Jason didn't expect was how much the visit would end up rattling him. That afternoon, when they arrived at the vet, the waiting room was packed. Several earlier appointments had run long, and there had even been some kind of emergency. So Jason and Anubis had to wait, surrounded by a full crowd of other pet owners and their animals. It didn't take long before people started noticing Anubis. Jason could feel the stares. A few owners pulled their pets closer or even tucked them back in their carriers. He could tell right away. People were scared. He was used to that by now. But this time, it was going to actually affect them. A staff member approached Jason looking a little uncomfortable. She spoke quietly and apologized, then asked if he and Anubis could wait outside. Some of the others in the room had said they didn't feel safe with Anubis inside. Jason looked down at Anubis, who was just sitting calmly at his side, not reacting to anything. He let out a quiet sigh. This dog wouldn't hurt a fly, not unless someone gave him a reason. But people didn't care about that. All they saw was the way he looked, and they judged him for it. No one in the waiting room would even look at Jason. He could feel the rejection hanging in the air. But without saying much, he nodded and took Anubis outside to wait. At the time, he had no idea just how much this choice would change things. They'd only been outside for a few minutes when a man in a long coat walked past them. He slowed to a stop as soon as he noticed Anubis. Then he turned back and asked Jason if the dog was his. When Jason said yes, the man knelt beside Anubis. Unlike everyone else, This guy didn't seem scared at all. In fact, he looked interested, focused. He introduced himself as the senior veterinarian and said he was just coming back from his break. He mentioned that he was in a rush for his next appointment, but something about Anubis had caught his attention enough to stop. He didn't explain what it was exactly, just that it was important. Then he asked Jason if he'd be willing to let him do the exam instead of the original vet Jason had booked with. He also promised to get them in faster if Jason agreed. Jason thought it was a little strange. The guy seemed almost too eager, but it was getting cold out, and there was no telling how long they'd have to wait otherwise. So Jason said yes. The senior vet nodded and walked back into the building, looking satisfied. Just 10 minutes later, Jason and Anubis were called in. But as they walked past the other people still waiting, Jason couldn't help noticing all the dirty looks he was getting. It was obvious to Jason that everyone knew he had been allowed to cut the line. People were glaring, but he didn't care. Their small-minded prejudice didn't matter to him. If it were up to him, they could all just deal with it. Jason walked Anubis into the exam room where the senior vet was already waiting. He was dressed in full gear, gloves, lab coat, even a face shield. It honestly looked more like he was prepping for surgery than a regular checkup, which caught Jason off guard. This was supposed to be a simple consultation, as Jason started explaining why he'd brought Anubis in, listing all the strange things that had been worrying him. The vet seemed more focused on quietly examining the dog. He barely responded to what Jason was saying, just circling around Anubis and looking him over from head to toe. Then, right in the middle of Jason's explanation, the vet suddenly cut him off. "I need to take care of something real quick," he said, before stepping through a side door and closing it firmly behind him. Jason was left standing there, confused and unsure what was going on. Through the door, Jason could hear muffled voices. He leaned in, trying to make out what they were saying, but couldn't catch any actual words. The conversation didn't last long, maybe 2 minutes, and when it went quiet again, Jason assumed the vet would be coming back soon. But he didn't. Jason waited. 5 minutes went by, then 10. By the 15-minute mark, he was fed up and completely in the dark. He got up and tried the door handle, only to find it locked. That's when he started knocking, then banging. He called out, asking if someone could please come open the door. Still no answer. His patience snapped. What was going on? Why were they locking him in? Did this have something to do with Anubis? His mind raced with frustration and confusion, and finally, driven by a rush of anger, Jason kicked the door open. The door slammed open, and there was the senior vet, standing calmly in the next room, like he'd been waiting there the whole time. He didn't even flinch at the broken door. Jason stormed in and demanded to know what the hell was going on. The vet glanced at his watch, then looked up. Without much emotion, he explained that he had just called the police, and they'd be arriving any minute now. Jason froze, completely blindsided. "What? Why?" he asked, voice tight with disbelief. The vet didn't give much of an answer. He simply said that the police would be better at explaining the situation than he could. Jason's heart was pounding. His head spun. What reason could there possibly be for calling the cops on his dog? Still buzzing with adrenaline, Jason made a split-second decision. If the police were coming, that probably meant they were going to take Anubis, and he wasn't going to let that happen. With Anubis close behind, Jason ran across the room, heading straight for the other door, desperate to escape. But it was already too late. The police? The police were already outside the building, blocking Jason's path. One look at them, and the animal control van parked nearby told him exactly what they were there to do. They wanted Anubis, and they were ready to take him. But Jason wasn't just going to hand over his dog without a fight. He stepped in front of Anubis and shouted, "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." One of the officers slowly stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. He wasn't there to fight, he just wanted to explain, and Jason deserved at least that much. The officer began by saying that the senior vet had recognized Anubis. After checking him thoroughly, he was certain this wasn't just any stray or odd-looking dog. Once he confirmed it, he called the authorities right away. That's why they were here. The dog Jason had bought from that shady seller wasn't a regular Mexican hairless. His real name was Zolo, and he used to belong to a well-known spiritual leader in Mexico City. This man was famous for teaching Aztec traditions and culture, and in those beliefs, dogs like Zolo held deep meaning. According to legend, this breed was said to guide souls to the underworld after death. Zolo had been specially trained by the spiritual leader to remain perfectly calm during funeral ceremonies. He would sit quietly by the man's side as a way to comfort grieving families. His presence meant the soul of the deceased wasn't being taken by the gods. That was his role. But a few months earlier, Zolo had been stolen by people who didn't respect those beliefs. Everyone assumed he'd been lost, or worse. Somehow, though, Zolo had survived and ended up in the hands of that uncaring seller at the market where Jason unknowingly bought him. Jason stood there, speechless. It was a lot to take in, but everything finally made sense. The dog's silence, his stillness, the strange energy about him. Zolo had never been just a pet. He had a purpose. As much as it hurt, Jason knew what he had to do. He crouched down and gently unhooked the leash, looking into Zolo's calm yellow eyes one last time. Saying goodbye wasn't easy, but Jason understood that the dog needed to go home, to help more families, to do what he was trained for. He handed Zolo over. Zolo was safely returned to his rightful owner in Mexico City. The spiritual leader, who turned out to be quite wealthy, was deeply grateful and sent Jason a generous reward for returning the dog. Later, Jason and his family adopted a new dog, this time from a proper shelter with all the right paperwork, and after making sure the whole family agreed. Every now and then, Jason still thinks about Anubis, Zolo, and everything that happened. He misses him, of course, but deep down, he knows he made the right choice. If you enjoyed the story, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might like it too, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.